rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we are going to talk about the features of the 18th century reflected in Robinson Crusoe. Before that, I will try to ask you some questions about the previous lecture. Let me ask you the following questions. If I ask you, when Defoe was a boy, he witnessed two disasters. What were they? Who can tell me what were the two disasters that Defoe witnessed while he was a boy? We have two disasters. The first one, yes, that's right. We have the Great Plague, and the second one, we have the Great Fire of London. So we have two disasters. The first one, the Great Plague, and the second one, we have the Great Fire of London. Another question, if I ask you, the Great Fire of London happened in, tell me the date of this Great Fire. I will give you three options. It happened in 1660, A. B. It happened in 1650, or in 1666. Which one of these? 1660, 1650, or 1666? Yes, that's right. So it happened in 1666. Another question. Defoe was a, complete this statement. Defoe was a lawyer, B, merchant, C, farmer. Which one of these? Yes, that's right. He was a merchant. Another question. Defoe was against King William of Orange or with King William of Orange. Which one of these? A or B? Again, Daniel Defoe was A, against King William of Orange, B, with King William of Orange. Yes, that's right. The second answer is the right answer. He was with King William of Orange. Another question. Why did Defoe use different pen names? Why did he use different pen names? Yes, you can explain by using because. So, because he was trying to hide his real name. Again, because he was trying to hide his real name to be safe from his enemies. You remember this? He wrote using different names like the merchant, etc. because he was trying to hide his real name to be safe from his enemies. Another question. Give two reasons why some critics think that Defoe is not the father of the English novel. You can choose, you remember we have 4 reasons for this. You can choose only 2 of them. For example, you can say he wrote for the purpose or for the sake of money. This is one reason. Another reason, some actions are not complete in his novel. For example, Robinson Crusoe, we don't have the end of the character Friday, and we have a lot of incomplete actions. He didn't complete his actions in the novel. Or we can say lack of emotions, and we have lack of psychological analysis of some characters. So we have 4 reasons. You can choose 1, 2 from them. He wrote for money, some actions are incomplete, lack of emotional perspective, and we have the last one, lack of psychological dimension. Now let's start with our today's lesson. We are going to talk about the features of the 18th century reflected in Robinson Crusoe. Let's start with a brief introduction about this. There are many changes that affected the writing of the novels in the 18th century. Some novelists try not to show the great influence of negative changes in their narratives. They make use of positive changes. Nevertheless, the novels of this age are full of both kinds of changes. Some novelists intend to reflect the reality of their society. One of them is Daniel Defoe. So one of these novelists was Daniel Defoe. He was trying to depict the picture or the real picture of his society. His novel, Robinson Crusoe, is a good example since it's set as the first English novel and it deals with the changes of the 18th century. So a good example to see the changes of the 18th, even the 17th century changes, we can go and see this novel and see the changes that are depicted in this novel. Now let's see. Robinson Crusoe, Defoe wrote about believable characters in realistic situations using simple language. You remember, in order to let the middle class readers understand his novel, he wrote in a simple language. He achieved a literary rank when he wrote Robinson Crusoe in 1719. It's a great novel that has a close approach to life or to real life in the 17th and 18th centuries. Defoe based some of his novel on the real story of the Scottish Alexander Selkirk, who spent around 5 years on the island of Juan Fernandez. So his novel was based on a real story of this Scottish traveler or Scottish person. William Selkirk went to sea in 1704. As a kind of punishment, he was put on the island of Juan Fernandez in the Pacific Ocean. The island was not populated with any human. So he was alone on this island and he was isolated from any contact with any people. It was isolated. He managed to live there until his rescue in 1709. He developed himself. Again, he spent around, if we go back, from 1704 to 1709, around 5 years. So this character or this person spent around 5 years in isolation. He developed himself and his experience of seeing things better. It seems that Defoe made use of this real story. He built his creative novel on this real event. So we have a real story, or Robinson Crusoe was based on a real story of the Scottish person, again, and the island we have Juan Fernandez, again we have Alexander Selkirk. It was based on the real story of the Scottish Alexander Selkirk, who spent around 5 years on the island of Juan Fernandez. Why Robinson Crusoe? If we ask ourselves, why did we choose this novel? We have reasons to choose such novel, and we will see the reasons for choosing this novel. There are several reasons for choosing Robinson Crusoe. The first one, it's usually considered the first English novel which is written in the 18th century. Again, the first reason, yes, it's usually considered the first English novel. Again, it's usually considered the first English novel which is written in the 18th century. Analyzing this novel will reveal the essential changes of the society at that age. So we have a novel from that time. We can see the changes of this society, and we can reveal the changes that happened during that time. Analyzing this novel will reveal the essential changes of the society at that age. In addition, it is a very important novel in the literary tradition. So this novel is very important in literature. Another reason, it's a realistic novel. James Berkeley says that realism is intended to present a true picture of life at a given time and place. Robinson Crusoe by default is a good example of realistic fiction. So it's a good example to show realism or the realistic picture of society at that time. And we have another comment by Ian Watt. Ian Watt states that the novel begins only when Defoe and Richardson discover how to give their characters sufficient particularity and autonomy to make them seem like real people. So the characters in this novel are similar to real people at that time. So if we read Robinson Crusoe, we can sense the social life in the 18th and 17th century. So it's a kind of real picture of that time. So we can sense again a realistic flavor in this novel. According to Oxford Dictionary of National Biography, Robinson Crusoe was the most famous novel for a long time. This novel was the famous novel all around the world. We can see everyone who reads literature should in some way or another read, yes, he should read Robinson Crusoe in order to get the start of English novel. Robinson Crusoe is like Defoe himself. Above all, however, it's the greatest mythic fantasy ever written of the solitary survivor who will never succumb, he will not starve, and he will not give into his paralyzing fear or extended isolation. Physically, mentally, and spiritually, he survives and grows stronger. So we can sense the strength of this hero, especially Robinson Crusoe. Robinson Crusoe is great because it carries a lot of changes that happened in the 18th century. So we can have these changes that happened in the 18th century. We have different changes from other kinds of traditional literature. So again, Robinson Crusoe is great because it carries a lot of changes that happened in the 18th century, different from other kinds of traditional literature. This novel was different from other kinds of literature because the following reasons. The first one, it has a new religious approach. There is a human need for God. There is a new perspective which is introduced in this novel. It deals with individual discovery. It's very important for any human to discover himself and build his own personality. So again, the first one, we have a kind of religious approach in this novel. The second one, this novel deals with individual discovery. So we have a change in thinking at that time. Individualism was very important during the age of Defoe. It's very important for any human to discover himself and build his own personality. The third one, it presents materialistic attitude in which a person can be rich. It's found in human nature. Part of the human interest is materialistic or material. You remember we have two sides of a human being, spiritual related to religion and spirit, and the other one materialistic related to, yes, material things like money. The fourth one, it meets the change of the reader's taste of the middle class. So we have a new taste of reading which was required by the middle class readers. There is a new taste of reading that requires a new kind of writing, such as novel. The fifth one, it has normal events which depend on scientific change of that age. 6. It deals with political aspect in the 18th century, and we can sense sometimes the 17th century political change. There is a great effect of politics in this novel. Again, let's see the changes in Robinson Crusoe. The first one, we have religious change. The second one, individualism. Number 3, materialism or materialistic change. And we have change in the reader's taste. Also we have scientific change, and the last one, political change. This novel presents civilization. Human beings can make use of their surrounding environment through using his mind, reason. So we have a new kind of thinking also all over this novel. Now let's see the first one again. Let's see the religious change. Many readers would consider Robinson Crusoe's adventures as a sign of the growth of religious understanding. There was a kind of religious struggle over power in the 17th century and 18th century. So we have a kind of religious struggle over power in the 17th and 18th centuries in England. In this novel, there was an indication to other people who have no religious ideas. We have the cannibals. We will see when we are going to analyze religious aspects in the novel. We have people who can eat other people. They are called cannibals. There is a kind of religious discovery, especially when Crusoe became alone on the island. He found new things about his faith in God, such as A. He finds God without any help from anyone. He discovered, we can see that he discovered the existence of God without any help from anyone. B. He indicated the influence of some people in England who had religious power. They prevented other people to think of themselves. Crusoe is against any given instruction without explanation from the church. From this idea about discovering his real religion, we can sense that Crusoe is against any given instruction without explanation from the church. Crusoe discovers the importance of religion by himself. He is in need for religion. His ideas about his religion are not clear or complete before the existence on the island. For example, he feels superior to other people. He is in command of others because he is an Englishman. He accepted his fate. Remember, we are talking about religious change. He accepted his fate. There were many effects of that. We can see he was thankful to God because he had survived and his shipmates died. He was thankful to be the only survivor after his ship was damaged. Second, we have he depended on God's will in some of his actions. The third one, we can see he prayed to God when he felt afraid. When he is afraid, he feels the existence of his God and the importance of his religion. So he depended on God's will in some of his actions. And we have the third one, he prayed to God when he felt afraid. In Robinson Crusoe, Defoe was open-minded and discussed a very sensitive topic in the 18th century, the religious aspect of his society. That topic was sensitive in the 18th century, even though Defoe discussed this topic in his novel. It was not easy to undergo and deal with religious power in the previous age. People of that time had to accept everything about their religion. Defoe himself was a victim of religious conflict many times. Now let's see the second change that is portrayed in this novel. We have the growth of individualism and freedom. In this novel, there is more focus on the personal experience of Crusoe rather than society as a group of people. Robinson Crusoe is a sailor and slave trader, so we can see that he is a sailor and slave trader. His parents didn't want him to go to the sea, even though he didn't take their advice and follows his sense of achieving his dream of being successful individual. In this paragraph, we can see that Defoe doesn't accept any idea from anyone, even from his father. He doesn't accept the advice of his father. He wants to get his own personality away from other members of society, even his family. He wants to be individual. So he achieved that. He wants to travel abroad and gets his personality. Crusoe cultivates and adapts himself into his strange environment and makes the island as his kingdom. When he comes to the island, you remember that he becomes isolated. On this island, Crusoe cultivates and adapts himself into his strange environment and makes the island as his kingdom. He becomes individual and he becomes as the king of his island. He doesn't give up to any challenge. He makes his own shelter and farms. He presents his experience in detail in order to reveal the strength and ability of a human mind in finding solutions for his problems and to be an independent individual. So, a human being can achieve his individualism if he tries. Crusoe is looking for his individual freedom. He doesn't want to stick to the traditional thinking of his society, even though he is alone on the island, but he feels free and happy to be away from the control of others. He can do whatever he wants. He has the right of his freedom. Some critics consider Crusoe as a prisoner on the island. Crusoe himself is uncertain about his situation, but he likes to be alone and to be away from the restrictions of his society in England. Again, this is a clear idea of individualism. Crusoe is looking for his individual freedom. He wants to be free. He doesn't want to follow the judgment and the instruction of anybody in his society. So he doesn't want to stick to the traditional thinking of his society. He wants to be distinguished and unique. So, even though he is alone on the island, but he feels free and happy to be away from the control of his society. He can do whatever he wants. He has the right of his freedom. Some critics, by the way, we can see, consider Crusoe a prisoner on the island. Some critics say that Crusoe is not a free individual. He is a kind of a prisoner on this island. But he likes to be alone. So we can see things from different sides. Some critics say that he is a free individual. Other critics say that he is not free and he is a kind of a prisoner on this island. So he doesn't achieve his individualism because he is in a kind of prison. Crusoe himself is uncertain. Crusoe himself is uncertain about his situation. But he likes to be alone and to be away from the restrictions of his society in England. Now let's see the third change, the materialistic interest. There was a tendency to be rich. Crusoe wanted to do anything to become rich. He even wanted to buy slaves from Africa and other places and sell them again in Brazil and other places. So he was a kind of slave trader. This is a kind of materialistic thinking of a human being. He wants to buy human beings and sell them again in other places in order to get more money and in order to be rich. This was not the attitude of Crusoe alone, but it represented the ambition of each individual in his country in England. So there was a kind of slavery and a kind of superiority of the English people. The fourth change, growing of the middle class and the change of the reader's taste. This novel, Robinson Crusoe, created a new class of readers. These readers could taste literature without great efforts that were needed in the previous kinds of literature. So, some readers in the previous age of Defoe, if they wanted to read, for example, a poem, they had to be well educated to understand the meaning of such poem. But in this kind of novel, they didn't want to have a good education in order to understand the meaning of this novel. So again, these readers could taste literature without great efforts that were needed in the previous kinds of literature. Not only the language and the elements were set to meet the needs of the readers or the middle class readers, but even the topic of the novel, which revealed the new experiences that were close to them. So the taste of the readers, we can see two reasons for this change in writing novel. We have the language of the novel was simple and the topic of the novel was close to their interest. Again, we have two reasons to meet the reader's taste. The language was simple, and the second one, the topic could meet their interest. Okay. The middle class readers wanted to educate themselves. They wanted long narratives such as Robinson Crusoe. There was a growing nation of readers at its beginning. Now let's see the fifth change, scientific change. we can see that the taste of this novel was not supernatural, so we can see most people no longer believed in supernatural ability in the 18th century. Robinson Crusoe is a normal character. So Robinson Crusoe himself was a character from the middle class, from the normal life. So he was, or Robinson Crusoe is a normal character who faces his fate. He becomes afraid when he has any dangerous situation. He has a great impact on the readers when he appears more human. So he is a human-like person. He is similar to human people, to human in general, and to human characteristics. He is similar to them. He can be weak and he can be strong. We can see the two sides of a human being. For example, when he sees a print of foot on the shore, he is afraid, or he becomes afraid. One day, let's see the quotation about the footprint. One day about noon, going towards my boat, I was exceedingly surprised with the print of a man's naked foot. So we can see he was surprised with the print of a man's naked foot on the shore, which was very plain to be seen on the sand. We will see that he couldn't sleep for many days because of this footprint. He was afraid of this footprint. So we can see he is similar to human being. The previous kinds of literature were full of imaginary and supernatural descriptions and characters. Crusoe discovers many things on the island by experimentation. For example, he builds many boats from trees of different sizes and comes to scientific conclusions. He has no supernatural power to move a large boat to the sea. He wants to make a channel. We can see he wants to make a channel of water to let the water carry the boat. Since it needs a large channel, he makes a smaller one. Now let's go back and see. We can see a normal description of everyday life. And he is not supernatural. He can't carry the boat and put it in the sea. We can see Crusoe discovers many things on the island by experimentation. He conducts many experiments and he learns by chance or by scientific analysis. You remember, experimentation is very good in scientific change also. For example, he builds many boats from trees of different sizes and comes to scientific conclusions. He has no supernatural power to move a large boat to the sea. He wants to make a channel of water to let the water carry the boat to the sea. Since it needs a large channel, he makes a smaller boat. Robinson Crusoe presents rational thinking in his life. He moves from the dark or negative side of thinking to positive one. He is a source of knowledge for his readers. He offers his readers a great deal of his logical thoughts. Political change. Now let's see the last change. We have political change. There is a colonial tendency in Robinson Crusoe. His life on the island and his previous adventures represent a colonial life. James Joyce said of Robinson Crusoe, he is the true prototype of the British colonist. So again, we can sense that from the quotation by James Joyce, he is the prototype of the colonial tendency of the British Empire. James Joyce said of Robinson Crusoe, he is the true prototype of the British colonist. Crusoe calls himself as the king of the island. At the end of the novel, he calls the island as a colony. The relationship between Crusoe and other characters, such as Friday, is a relationship between a master and a slave. So the relationship between Crusoe and the other character, Friday, is a kind of relationship between a slave and a master. The master was Crusoe and the slave was Friday. Thank you so much. This is the end of today's lecture.